courtroom was packed. Rows of people sat in tense silence, the air thick with the weight of expectation. The dim overhead lights buzzed softly, casting a dull glow over the polished wooden benches at the front of the room. Judge Richard Holloway sat high on his bench, tapping his fingers impatiently on the desk before him. He was an older man, well into his 60s, with silver hair and deep lines carved into his face from years of scowling at defendants. To him, this was just another routine case. Another face, another name, another person wasting his time. But what he didn't realize was that today would be different. Today, the person sitting before him wasn't just another defendant, and today would be the day his arrogance cost him everything at the defense table. Danielle Carter sat calmly, her back straight, her expression unreadable. She was dressed professionally in a crisp navy blue suit, her black hair pulled back into neat bun. Her presence was commanding, but Judge Holloway didn't bother to notice. Were you watching this today? Let us know in the comments below. To him, she was just another black woman who had gotten herself into trouble. His smirk widened as he glanced down at the case file. He hadn't even heard her speak yet, but he had already made up his mind this would be easy. He let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. Well, he mused, loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear. Another entitled individual who thinks the law doesn't apply to them. A few jurors shifted uncomfortably. The prosecutor, a younger man in his 30s, pursed his lips but remained silent. Danielle didn't flinch. Judge Holloway glanced up at her. I assume you're here to claim you were wrongfully arrested? That this is all just a big misunderstanding? More laughter rippled through the room. Danielle's lips curled into the slightest smile, but it wasn't the smile of someone nervous. It was the smile of someone who knew something nobody else did. The prosecutor cleared his throat and adjusted his tie. Your Honor, the defendant, Miss Carter, Judge. Holloway interrupted, leaning forward with amusement. Let's not waste the court's time. Why don't you tell me why you think you're special? Danielle finally spoke, her voice smooth, and even with all due respect, Your Honor, I'd prefer to stick to facts rather than opinions, Judge Holloway. Smirk faltered for the briefest second. He didn't like the way she carried herself, too composed, too unshaken. Most people in her position fumbled, stuttered, begged, but she sat there like she owned the room. Facts? He echoed mockingly. All right, Miss Carter, let's hear your facts. Danielle exhaled slowly and reached into the inner pocket of her blazer. The bailiff instinctively stiffened. Judge Holloway scoffed, ready to make a comment about wreck behavior. But then she pulled out a small black leather case and flipped it open for a moment. The entire courtroom was silent. Inside the case was a golden badge with bold, unmistakable letters engraved across it. Judge Holloway's face drained of color. The prosecutor's pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. A few jurors leaned forward, eyes wide in disbelief. Danielle set the badge on the table like a royal flush in a poker game. My name, she said, her voice steady and clear, is Special Agent Danielle Carter, United States Secret Service. Judge Holloway's jaw clenched. He was stunned into silence. Danielle let that moment settle before continuing, and before we proceed any further, I think it's important to acknowledge that my arrest was not only unjustified, but also a direct violation of federal law. The judge swallowed hard. Danielle reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a sealed government document. This, she said, sliding the folder toward the bailiff, is an official complaint drafted by the Department of Justice. It details the numerous violations committed by the officers who arrested me, including the falsified report that made its way to this courtroom. Judge Holloway's hands gripped the edge of his desk so tightly that his knuckles turned white. You see, Your Honor, she said, her voice calm but commanding. The officers who arrested me never bothered to check my credentials. Instead, said they assumed that because of the color of my skin, I must have been doing something wrong. The prosecutor's face was now a mix of shock and fear. He flipped through his own documents, as if trying to piece together how he had missed this information. And now Danielle continued, I find myself sitting in front of a judge who, instead of conducting a fair trial, mocked me before hearing a single piece of evidence. The weight of her words crushed the room. The courtroom was deathly silent. Judge Holloway looked like he had just aged 10 years. His arrogance had vanished, replaced with panic. Danielle straightened her blazer and looked the judge directly in the eye. This isn't just about me, she said. This is about a system that allows people in power to abuse their authority without question. But today, Judge Holloway, you questioned the wrong person. She leaned forward slightly, and I promise you this is far from... Over the prosecutor jumped up. Your Honor, in light of this new information, the prosecution requests that all charges against Miss Carter be immediately dropped. Judge Holloway's lips pressed into a thin line. He looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. He cleared his throat. Case dismissed. He muttered, the gavel slammed down, but for the first time in his career, it wasn't his authority that silenced the room. Danielle gathered her things and walked toward the exit, but before she stepped out, she paused. She turned her head just slightly, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Next time, she said, her words slow and deliberate. Think before you laugh. And with that, she walked out, leaving Judge Holloway sitting there, pale, humiliated, and knowing his career was over. Because after today, the world would hear about this. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.